Our story continues from the beginning of the Great Fray coverage. After the failed raid attempt, Thrak took in the sight, the carnage, the ruin. It was beautiful. To him, or to the closest emotion or concept to his kind could register. He lost a few of his herd to the ambushers, which was odd but acceptable. This must have been a scouting force, or at the very confident beast lord, thinking to take advantage of their revelries after a successful raid. Foolish vultures. But before he could issue the command to raid corpses and add their meat to the pile and pyres for the revelries, another horn sounded. Another raid? No, this horn is different. One of talk? He had heard this horn before. The first beast lord he followed answered it, and he was cut down. A good lesson Thrak could not forget. He saw another herd approach, their leader in the front. Thrak and all his herd went for their weapons and took to battle stances. The new enemy stopped, barely containing their want for murder and destruction. The leader strode forth and spoke. Thrak of the goring tusk. We are the sundered hooves herd of the all herds. We see your strength and wish for you to join us to bring greater ruin to all. You only need to submit to me, and together we can slay even greater foes. Thrak took in this statement, and he could not believe the audacity. Not only did this upstart want him to bend the knee, but do so willingly. This could not stand, nor would it. I know not your name or your reputation, but I will not submit. Rather, I challenge you, winner take all. The new upstart hesitated, knowing if he denied, he'd be seen as weak and easily replaced. Thrak knew this on top of the two other factors that, for one, it is the Beastman way, and two, should Thrak lose, well, wouldn't be his problem anymore. I accept. I am Karis Bloodtusk, and I shall take your head this night. The arena was set, their blades anointed, and the combatants entered the arena to fight for supremacy. As soon as the shaman declared the ritual duel to commence, Karis took the initiative, leaping at Thrak with a wide arc from his axe. Thrak parried it and made a quick yet shallow slice across his opponent's bicep. Re-establishing his footing, Thrak went in, aiming for the shoulder of his opponent with one of his falchions, and yet as soon as it was parried, he made a thrust into Karis' leg with his secondary falchion. Thrak observed and learned from many pivotal moments of his life, but watching how other races dueled was among the most valuable. Not wanting to lose momentum, Thrak did 2 overhead strikes followed by a headbutt. Disoriented, next thing Karis felt was red, hot liquid dripping from his face. A falchion having embedded into his skull, and a follow-up strike to the neck ended the event immediately. Thrak took a breath of relief and exultation. He grabbed Karis' head, lifted it, and to the sky roared in triumph. All of you answer to me now, and together we will bring ruin to all civilization. But first, a night of revelry and celebration, as we welcome new kin into the fold, and even more bodies to sacrifice to the hearthstone, to fuel the winds of chaos and spread our corruption. And applause, braying roars of agreement rang back towards him. As the two herds came together as one under a new alpha beast Thrak, he took a moment and looked at his latest trophy. Thank you. Without you, this union would have never happened. This is the start of something great and destructive. After his little talk, he looked at the head of Karis, to the belt, and made his way back to his hut to join in the celebrations. This being one of many to come, both trophies and revelries. Hello warlords and generals, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be covering the units of the Beasts of Chaos, starting from the lowliest of Ungors going all the way up to the alpha beast leaders such as Beast Lords and Dragon Lord Shoggoths. If you like this video and content I'm making, please consider subscribing and liking the video. And on that note, let us begin. Starting with the bottom of the food chain are the Gors. These, mostly man in feature for the beastmen, have small horns, patchy manes. Often they are brutalized, tortured, and savagely bullied by the other members of the herds, making them have to rely on remaining on the outskirts for food scraps once the bigger, stronger members of the tribe have eaten their fill. This causes the Gors to herd into larger numbers to survive and stalk in the shadows, hoping to find some weaker or unsuspecting foe to vent their bitterness on. Another thing that sets them apart from the other beastmen is that they are quite a bit more dexterous than the others, making them the de facto craftsmen, making crude weapons such as axes and spears, or even bows for themselves, which they use to devastating effect while remaining out of danger, and it is a very deadly strategy as most enemies see their exposed flanks and rear filled with arrows suddenly and out of nowhere, while the rest of the herd charges their front line. Above them is the Gor, the next step up, being taller than a man as well as stronger and meaner. Having thicker manes and bigger horns, they charge at the enemy with terrifying speed, hacking into them with crude weapons and spiked implements. Though these are not their only weapons, as they are even unarmored. They have wolf-like fangs, horns for bashing or goring, or even sharp claws to tear enemies apart. Foe renders tend to lead Gors into battle. Typically it is the Gor with the thickest mane and the biggest set of horns. Often leading by violent example, some units take them with the bray horns to add to the beats and sounds of battle, as well as banners of flayed skin and filthy furs. The smell of this banner adds to the beastmen's bloodlust, stoking the flames of savagery and anarchy and waking further primal rage. Among the Gors that prove to be the strongest among their kin are eventually quote-unquote promoted to Bestigor, meaner and better equipped Gors. Being the strongest of the Gors, they always get first pick of weapons and armor, often going into battle with ransacked plate armor and chainmail, wielding giant two-handed axes to cleave into foes with. During feasts they will push aside and bully all other members of the herd to get to the closest seats to the herdstone, basking in its warping glow and glory. Often viewed in a favorable light by the Beast Lord and Bray Shaman alike, being not only the best of the best among despoilers, but for the ferocity in battle, and it will often accompany them as bodyguards into battle. Beast Lords, however, must always be wary of the elite guard, for the Bestigors are also among the most ambitious of the herds, and will gladly usurp the Beast Lord's position should they prove too weak or allow their guard to drop around them, seizing the opportunity and becoming Beast Lord themselves. Some of these Bestigors will ride a chariot pulled by a pair of Tuskors into combat. These ramshackled war machines are poorly constructed and held together just enough to survive an impact into enemy lines while bearing the Bestigor on the back. The construction overall of these is poor, as it goes against the very nature of beastmen who construct machines of war. But occasionally, a Bestigor will be inspired to have one of its own after witnessing an enemy chariot bring carnage with speed and ease. After witnessing this, a Bestigor will go out into the wilds and capture 2 Tuskors. This task alone usually leaves the Bestigor gutted or impaled, a feast for the Tuskors and crows. Though, if successful, the second phase begins. After corralling the captured Tuskors, the Bestigors will bully and force other Gors and most specifically Gors, to fetch materials, lumber, scrap, and discarded parts of ruined machinery or destroyed homes, and also whip the Gors into service to actually construct the chariot itself. The Gors' dexterous fingers and man-thing-like minds allow them to be better at crafting said war machines after the work is completed, more often than not. The Gors and Gors that assisted in the construction of it will be the first the chariot is tested on, however, how effective it truly is, and to make sure it actually stays together. Even though they may be seen as oddities, the rest of the herd will look on in envy and wonder as the chariot shreds enemies with both speed and carnage that none could do on their own or without it. These next beastmen require no chariots or even mounts. They are hulking creatures with the top of a beastman, but where 2 legs are normally, there are 4 legs. These are the Centigores, standing tall enough where only the mightiest of beast lords can hope to compare in size. This size isn't just for show, as Centigores are incredibly strong. They often charge straight at a foe with spear and other crude weaponries. They will often crash in front lines, breaking shield walls or outflanking enemies, shattering ribs and crushing into the enemy's unprotected side. As the enemy line reels and falters, these beasts will rear back, mauling with clawed forelimbs and jabbing again and again with their spears until they shatter. Despite this and speed and strength, they lack both cunning and the animal-like patience of others of the herd, often needing a strong-willed alpha beast to keep them in line so that they don't charge from cover and ruin an ambush. They also are quite clumsy. Even though they are naturals at wielding weapons, they cannot make them at all, often coercing, usually violently, Ungors into making their spears. This exchange often leads with the Ungor's death, the Centigore not only testing the new weapon, but also venting their envy out of spite that they themselves cannot craft their own weapons. Often gathering in herds of their own close to the rest of the Great Frey's domain, but staying in wide, usually barren areas to allow for running around, such as deserts, open grasslands, or they will even trample out sections of jungles or forests to create such environments if none are available. Once found, they will make migratory trips to the Great Frey's herdstones, defecating on it to show their presence. During feasts, they will drink in excessive amounts of sulfuric, chaotic infused brews. These concoctions often heighten their bravado, dulling pain and fear. Only upon the next day, when they wake, do they feel the after effects of such potent brews. Due to their alcoholism and speediness, they are used as messengers by Bray shamans, often whispering the message to the Centigores and sending it on its way. Though normally a Centigore would forget the message, it instead, upon arriving to its intended recipient, will speak the message in the shaman's voice, as if it was almost like a pre-recorded message. We move on from the Gorgon and those based on the units that make up Bray herds, except for the god-specific ones, which we will cover in a separate video, and to move on to Gors. The Minotaurs of the Age of Sigmar and Warhammer setting in general, being of a much larger stature and strength, these beastmen are possessed of a blood greed greater than their Gor cousins, causing Gors to be nomadic, ever driving for fresh meat and the warm blood of their enemies. These factors, on top of the arrogance of being larger, makes Gors barrel into enemy lines with recklessness and savagery, tearing apart vanguards and shield walls in order to feast upon the enemy mid-battle. Making it a practice to fight with such explosive rage and savagery that they attempt to catch limbs as they lop off mid-air flying. Their blood greed is so great that even attempt to eat geists and demonic entities, as this is no normal hunger, and it is supernatural behavior makes it never truly go away for long. After they have done feasting on the most recent victims, they will move on shortly after, as the blood greed is never ending and constant. They have to constantly seek battle in order to even attempt to satisfy this curse of a hunger. Gors are the base of any warhorde, but they are not what tells of their coming. This honor belongs to the Gorgon, a towering hulk of muscle that is leagues above Gors in stature, strength, and hunger. They have been driven insane by the hunger that curses Gors, and most of them have little to no sentience left. Often hearing their roars and footfall long before seeing them, they barrel towards the enemy, slicing up foes and shoveling any meat they can down their throats, rotted meat and torn flesh of previous meals still hanging from their maws. How these beasts are made is not entirely known. The prevailing theory is a Bulgor cannibalized its own herd. After consuming enough, it will morph into a the Bulgor will morph into the Gorgon from all the chaos tainted meat it has just consumed. This causes the Bulgor to have massive muscle mutation and bulging muscle growth, growing several stories tall, and as mentioned, an insatiable and deep hunger. Only the most powerful and fearless of alpha beasts can direct a Gorgon without becoming a meal themselves, directing them as living war machines to go into cutting swaths and weakening enemy morale as the enemy watches their friend and allies being torn apart by basically a skyscraper with scythes for arms. These next Gors are cousins to the Gorgons. Centigores hunger not only for flesh and blood, but they hunger for magic instead. The first of the Centigores devoured Bray shamans, causing a spontaneous growth. There are two eyes melding into one singular eye. This eye is now blind to all things physical, but instead now allows the Centigore to see magical sources more clearly, allowing them to hunt down wizards and devour them whole. This eye also allows them for not for only devouring magic and wizards, but also to help them pick out them from a battle, no matter how raging it may be. Centigores also have a disdainful attraction to magical ruins, the wards, ruins, and residual magics catching their attention. Once found, they will grab boulder-sized chunks of the ruins and use them as crude projectiles. A cunning alpha beast will use Centigores not just as mage hunters and magical deterrents, but as for long-range siege weapons. The boulders it tossing, breaking walls and gates, allowing for easier access for the delicious mages within and the herd as a whole to get into the city without much effort in the overall siege. Now, due to the massive roster that this faction has, I'm actually going to be splitting this video into 2 or 3 parts. So that's the end of the video today. We're just going to cover the Gors and the basic unit for the Bray herds and the war hordes. Next we'll probably be covering the god-specific units and the dragon ogres and covering all the chaotic specific units. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing. I upload both Age of Sigmar and 40k lore when my schedule fits it. Right now I'm working a lot, so just whenever I can. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and remember to have fun.